I'm Tom Richards and welcome to my UX case study for designing a new feature for the Spotify podcast offering titled PodPack. Spotify is an extremely popular audio streaming service largely known for its music offerings. Users can play, share and search for music via the mobile app and the desktop app. In recent years, Spotify has begun making large strides into the podcasting market, buying up exclusive rights to many podcast channels. As a regular podcast listener and a fan of the medium, I often found myself presented with the same podcast recommendations, and I regularly found myself opening the app, searching within the genres, and coming out the other end of my search with nothing new or exciting. My hunch was that users find it difficult to find new and interesting podcasts via the Spotify app. My goal was to understand how users are listening to podcasts and ultimately provide users with a way to uncover their new favorite podcast. In order to redesign a new way for users to find their new favorite podcast, I followed the UX framework of the Double Diamond. Starting with the problem, I moved through a series of divergent and convergent stages to arrive at a specific solution. To begin, I wanted to research and understand the problem. I did this by desk research, benchmarking, and persona mapping. I spent time reading online podcast forums, such as Reddit, where power users often complained about the podcast offering via Spotify. I downloaded and investigated what other competitors were offering to get a better idea of how others were providing solutions. I also dug into the annual reports that Spotify provides online. Here I learned that Spotify has 3.6 million podcasts on the platform, and they have recently acquired multiple spoken word platforms such as radio, audiobooks, and live audio presentations such as Clubhouse. Working through the annual reports was enlightening, as I noticed that Spotify has already begun reworking how their podcast service is being delivered. This confirmed my hunch that there is room for improvement. Not only that, but Spotify is spending a lot of time and a lot of money on the space. So from a business point of view, it is essential that they innovate. But my question remained: how does a user find their new favorite podcast? It was time to learn more by talking to real people. I created an interview guide and recruited 3 people who are podcast users to learn more about their usage and how they find new podcasts. I collated the vital information on a virtual whiteboard, Miro, and used affinity mapping techniques to uncover insights. My major insights included: Number 1, users mainly found podcasts via word of mouth, with friends and family being the strongest recommendations. Statements such as, "I don't think there has ever been an in-app recommendation that I have followed through on," and "I try not to search, I ask friends, it's more reliable than an algorithm," were very common. 2, users are always hungry for recommendations, with users spending on average 2 hours a day listening to podcasts. 3, users don't seem to trust the algorithm. When searching, it is hard to tell what is reputable, reliable, and if it aligns with my values. Through these insights, I found 2 potential recommendations for how I might proceed into the next phase. How might we engage people through digital word of mouth? And how might we explore ways to connect people through podcasts? Now that we had converged onto a specific problem, it was time to ideate some potential solutions. I used a rapid Crazy 8 ideation technique, and I felt I had a bit more juice in the tank, so I jumped in for a second round. Now that I had a heap of ideas, it was time to work out what was viable, feasible, and desirable. I used an effort versus impact matrix, which highlighted a couple of candidates, but I also wanted to try a DFV framework to get a better idea of what I was looking at. I selected an idea titled the PodPack. Speaking and listening to users, I found that people were always hungry for recommendations, but reluctant to trust the algorithm. The 3 I spoke with rarely using it. Friends and family recommendations were always the strongest. And when users were stuck for recommendations, they sometimes tried to remember what others had suggested. Not only that, but people were using word of mouth. Why fight it? Why not try to go with that existing habit and enhance it? I whipped up a storyboard to better understand how it might fit within a person's life. And from here, I moved on to some paper wireframes to get a basic idea of how a digital flow may work. But then, after mulling on the idea for a few days, I felt like I still had a few more ideas inside. I wanted to see how I might be able to tackle the issue of users having trouble finding their new favorite podcast head on. I came up with idea number 2, the Oracle. It was based on an idea called the Trusted Advisor. The idea was that a digital advisor could give a recommendation with some extra filters added in. I wanted people to have a fun experience hunting for a new recommendation, adding in a wild card at the end. I made a storyboard to explore how it might fit into a person's life, then creating a lo-fi wireframe in Figma. It's kind of a tree, think a quiz, and you would answer questions and come to an answer. I had 2 lo-fi prototypes. It was time to test with users. Now, going into the testing, my main concerns were, how did a user progress through the flow? Were there any issues? Was there a preference? And possibly one of the most important things, was it fun? So my synthesis and testing revealed that users did find elements of both fun, adding in a random name generator, which I'll show you in a second, got a short laugh, and the BuzzFeed-esque quiz in the Oracle was also an area for enjoyment. Ultimately, though, users reported that they were more likely to use the PodPack feature over the Oracle feature, although it still was fun to use. The gift wrapping feature, which you'll see in a second, was missed and confusing in each interview, so I had to change that. And I then continued on to a mid-fidelity clickable prototype in Figma. And now I can present to you the PodPack. So we'll see here that a user can enter the PodPack through the main dashboard. We'll see here that there is a random name generator which aids with making decisions, and it's also a bit of fun. Users can add podcasts through their favorites and their most recent. And then when you're finished, we can wrap it up. And so when you wrap it up, you can share. You can also select a gift wrap so that when you send it through to someone. Now it's been sent, and I just want to show you how it would look for the receiving user. So there'd be a gift and an animation of a gift opening the package, and then a user can save this to their library. Now, the next steps I see here is that the prototype needs further testing and further investigation of the gift wrapping feature. I also think that we can bring the prototype up to a higher fidelity and continue testing. My major concern is that this prototype relies on users sharing podcasts with their friends, and it's difficult to get people to do what you want without some kind of incentive. So the person who receives a PodPack are ultimately the people who gain the most. I think there's more opportunity to explore word of mouth and what that means digitally, and try to encourage users in that way. At the end of the day, I'd love to see more sharing of information in a fun way. And a feature like this may help to increase the consumption, usage, and enjoyment of podcasts. It's like sharing a mixtape or a recommended reading list. One user suggested that it might be helpful in education settings. Listen to these podcasts before next lesson. And so I think I'm optimistic about this idea, but I think it requires bringing it up to higher fidelity and further testing. Thank you.